Hello again, college football fans, coming at you with the Week 8 review, and nothing much has changed. It looks like still looking like the college football playoff is going to be filled, all four of those slots, by teams that have been there before. Maybe not as much as usual. Obviously, Clemson won't be there, and that's going to be a new look for the playoff. But Georgia's been there before. Oklahoma's been there before. Obviously, Alabama and Ohio State have been there before, and it's looking like more than likely at least three of those four teams are going to be there again. Um, at least that's how it's looking right now. Going to the national upset pick, once again, I was rejected roundly by my pick that Northwestern would pull a huge upset over the Michigan Wolverines. And, it looked good there in the first half a little bit. Looked like they had some juice, but the Big Ten, I forget about the Big Ten. They're not like the SEC. When you have a healthy SEC, it's you have your top, and then there's a middle class. It's almost like it's almost like geopolitics. If a society's healthy, then the middle class will be healthy. And I forget that about the Big Ten. The Big Ten has got the king, Ohio State. It's got its few nobles, Wisconsin, Iowa, Penn State, Michigan State, and then it's just garbage. I mean, at least the SEC, you have to go way down to the bottom of the cellar before you get to the garbage territory. But you got, like I said, you've got your upper half, and then you've just got trash in the Big Ten. And so I forget that when trying to pick upsets. So maybe I'll go back to the Oklahoma well, which seems like every week they're just trying their best, flirting with that upset bug, but they continue to churn out the wins. So until they lose, it's looking like it's going to be more familiar faces towards the end. Cincinnati looked a little shaky against a Navy team with a terrible record, so that doesn't bode well for them. Notre Dame continues to win, and if Notre Dame continues to win out, then they'll be back in the discussion as maybe another odd man out. As bad as everyone, I think, in the nation would hate to see that, except for Notre Dame fans. They're always lurking around there, trying to spoil a competitive slate of playoff teams, but they're there. You got, I tell you, Ole Miss is an Alabama, upset away from being right back in that college football playoff discussion as heavy as anybody, in my opinion. If they snuck in against Georgia, like I said, Georgia better step it up on that offense. They better have JT Daniels better be as good as advertised, and they better have some improvement in their skill players or some guys coming back healthy, because Georgia does not want to try to hold Ole Miss under 30 points, which is, what they'd probably have to do to beat them in an SEC championship game. But, that's looking way ahead. And obviously I've still got plenty of confidence in my Crimson Tide holding serve and making it back to Atlanta. But, I'm looking ahead as usual. But back to this weekend, the Alabama-Tennessee game, third Saturday in October. It was fun. It was that first half was the most competitive half in this series in a long time. I should have gone back and found out exactly the year that was. I'm thinking it was 2015 when Tennessee took us all the way to the very end. And of course, 2019 there were some hairy moments after Tua got injured. And until Diggs got that fumble recovery that pretty much put the game out of reach for them in that one. So there were some exciting moments there. But, I mean, the first half yesterday it went basically the way I predicted. The big caveat was the punt block. And my question about that was, I don't understand why we were even in a punt block formation. Why weren't we just trying to return that punt? I mean, 4th and 30, we had shown that we can move the ball on them. We figured we'd continue to be able to move the ball on them. Why was that desperation there early in the game, feeling to be punting, blocking punts? Because, that happens a lot, running into punters and just spoiling good defensive series. Don't be trying to punt blocks unless you really need it, unless you really need a momentum changer. But all that did was keep Tennessee in the game longer than they probably should have been. But Alabama wound up taking control of the game probably about a quarter and a half later than I thought they would. And so that's the reason that score wound up being a couple of more touchdowns than not a couple of but 10 points higher on either side than I predicted. But hey, man, I was very happy with Alabama's effort. The tight ends really kind of, Latu atoned himself, but Billingsley is still in the doldrums, it looks like, and it looks like it might have gotten a little bit mental or psychological with him as far as being able to catch balls. But that's something that they'll continue to be able to work on, and luckily there's just not that much to be scared of on the rest of the slate outside of that Auburn game. LSU looks like they have fully embraced their role this year as just garbage, and as a matter of fact, we'll talk about that later, but Alabama seems to me to be a team that is slowly finding itself, but it's still young. Bryce Young is still a young quarterback, as crazy as that sounds after watching him play, but he is, and he's getting better every week. The offensive line seems to be getting continuity every week. I mean, they can't help but, playing more plays and more downs together to get a little bit more chemistry and a little bit more cohesion together as a unit, which is what you need out of your O-line. The defense, it just is what it is. When Alabama began to struggle, my Facebook feed, I saw a lot of wringing hands and a lot of, Alabama's just definitely overrated this year, and we will not be playing for the big prize. And slow your roll. We're talking about 15 straight wins over a rival. Granted, they've been in a historically horrible rut for those last 15 years, but this is a plucky team that looks like they have made the first decent hire in over a decade, and it's difficult. The best of teams, it's difficult to beat your rival every year, and this is a proud program in Knoxville that we have been pushing around for a decade and a half now, and that's unheard of in this series and in pretty much any reputable rivalry series. These kind of streaks don't happen, and this is a streaky series, and in a streaky series, this has gone way beyond anything we've seen before, and it's very impressive. And the idea that struggling with your rival that you've beaten 14 straight times for a half is a signal to your fan base that you've taken a big step back, that's good news for me. I just feel like that's good news, and I'm just everybody knows where I stand. Alabama's going to hold serve and go back to that SEC championship game, and they're going to take care of business against an overrated Georgia team. Now, they're not very overrated, but obviously, we'll be talking more about that as especially next week. They got a big game in Jacksonville in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I don't have any standards or practices or human resources department to answer to, so it will always be the cocktail party to me. And back to the Alabama-Tennessee game, the third Saturday in October, whether it's played on the third Saturday of October or not, it's always going to be called that for me as well. And Tennessee is still looking like a team that is on the move, and they are on the rise with a bullet, and Heupel has nothing to be ashamed of, and that Tennessee fan base has nothing to be ashamed of, and they've got a lot to be excited about, because this team had no business playing as well as it's played in this first two-thirds of this season, and I expect nothing but more good things out of them, and I think that they may have another big upset. They may have a big signature upset ahead for them, because the way they played against Alabama is a continuation of their vast improvement from the last coach, and especially the last year. And I expect to see that continue. And so we're going to move on to the rest of the conference and talk about what happened in a slow week. Lots of teams were on their bye week. Arkansas did exactly what I said that they would do. LSU, Ole Miss, That game, just the opposite of the Tennessee-Alabama game, that game turned out to be a couple of scores for each team lower than I had anticipated and predicted, obviously, but it wound up being a 14-point Ole Miss victory nonetheless. And like I said, LSU, they're just hot garbage now, and Ole Miss is a legitimate top 10 looking team, and they've got a couple of weeks to really prove themselves coming up. And Lane Kiffin has done everything that he's been expected to do this season. I don't think anybody realistically felt like they had a chance to go into Bryant-Denny and upset Alabama. But Alabama keeps winning. That 42-21 loss is going to look more and more acceptable as the year rolls on. And they were banged up, so I expect them to get a lot of skill players back next week, and they should continue to be able to look as impressive as they have thus far. Moving on to Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, Mike Leach did exactly what I said he would do. He went in there and scored more points against an SEC school than he has certainly all season, and maybe all of his career. I'll have to check what he did last year, his SEC tenure. Vanderbilt wasn't able to score as many points as I thought they might, but Mississippi State's defense is a little underrated. When they run into strong teams that have vastly superior talent and superior lines, they can look a little pedestrian. But when they're fighting against somebody their own size or smaller, that defense is no joke. And they proved that in Nashville this week. And if anybody hasn't seen the post-game interview with Mike Leach talking about his favorite Halloween candy, I implore you to go look that up, because this guy, if he's not a football coach, he should be an orator of some type. Maybe not a stand-up comedian, but I would pay to go listen to this guy speak for 30 minutes, because he's just odd and funny and engaging, I guess you'd say. South Carolina, Texas A&M. I never even got around to predicting a score for this game, but if I had, it would have been something like 44-14. But that's pretty much exactly the way that game, I expected that game to go. And now Jimbo and Texas A&M look every bit a top 15 team. They very well could win out and finish the season with 2 losses. And like I said, that continues to make that loss a little bit more forgivable for Alabama against these guys. And Calzada obviously is continuing to progress, and that spells bad news for the rest of the conference. And Texas A&M, to me right now, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Auburn are all vying for second fiddle right now. And like I said, especially Auburn and Ole Miss, considering they only have 1 loss. Those 2 teams are an Alabama misstep away from going to Atlanta as the SEC West representative. And in Ole Miss's case, since they only have the 1 loss to Alabama, that means that they're still in line for everything. So that's definitely those 3 teams are definitely ones to keep an eye out on for the rest of this season, because I was talking about that healthy middle class. Well, one or two of those teams is upper class, and the other one will be relegated to middle class, and we'll see who that is as the season progresses. And next week we got a great slate of games in the conference and nationally. And obviously tomorrow I will have the SEC Power Ranking Week 9 version out for you guys, and hopefully there'll be a lot more to come as we move to the stretch final run of this regular season. And it's been a good one so far, and I can't wait to see what happens. Thanks a lot.